Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you guys with the most up-to-date political, economic and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. Okay, happy Wednesday everybody. Just a piece of housekeeping at the beginning of today's episode. I am experiencing a few minor issues with local authorities, which I'm trying to deal with currently. There is a slight possibility that I will not be able to release an episode for several days if things go south, but hopefully we can manage them fine and there'll be regular episodes for the rest of the week. Just giving you a heads up now that there is this risk that there may be disruptions to the release of videos. Fingers crossed that we deal with them, however. But that being said, let's jump into today's episode. Yesterday, Tuesday, North Korea fired a missile over Japan for the first time since 2017. Tokyo, which issued a rare public safety warning, said the projectile splashed down in the Western Pacific about 3,200 kilometers east of Japan. Japanese Prime Minister Kishida condemned the provocation. Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol warned of a resolute response. Washington condemned the long-range test as dangerous and reckless, and the European Union called it a reckless and deliberately provocative action. In Tuesday trading, Asian defense-related companies in Tokyo and Seoul gained after the launch. Today, Wednesday, in a joint exercise, the US and South Korea conducted missile drills in response, firing a volley of missiles into the ocean. The US and Japan also held joint drills. If pandemic, the Russian war in Ukraine, and global recession wasn't enough, the world now has a potential crisis on the Korean peninsula to add to its list of concerns. North Korea is particularly important for us here on China Update to follow too, as the so-called Hermit Kingdom is one of Beijing's few allies, and the Korean peninsula has long been identified as one of the most dangerous geopolitical flashpoints in Asia. Senior US ex-official and academic Susan Shirk, in her new book, published last week, Overreach, identified the Korean Peninsula and Taiwan as the two most likely flashpoints in US-China engagement. Unlike in 2017, it's very unlikely that Russia and China will be willing to work with a US-led Western effort to respond to the North Korean launch through the UN system. Indeed, today, Wednesday, the United States asked the UN Security Council to meet on North Korea. However, according to multiple outlets, diplomats have said that China and Russia are opposed to a public discussion and that, quote, any meaningful council action is unlikely. End quote. China is still on holiday this week, so state media and government statements have been very limited. We will continue following the story as it evolves, focusing primarily on the aspects that relate to regional geopolitics and Chinese relations with the US, South Korea, and Japan. With this renewed attention on a dangerous potential Sino-US flashpoint, let's spend the remainder of today's video looking at key aspects of the US-China military competition through recent developments. And the first is military arms. This week, to mark National Day, Chinese state media aired footage of its most powerful strategic nuclear-capable weapons, including anti-ship so-called carrier killers, designed by the People's Liberation Army specifically to deny US and Japanese navies access to the waters within the so-called First Island Chain in the East China Sea, with the threat of unacceptable damage and casualties. Analysts agree that the footage represents a warning to the United States as tensions, especially related to Taiwan, increase this year. Chinese commentators are not being shy either about reaching this conclusion. Quote, showcasing Dongfeng series strategic weapons is a subtle warning to the United States, which is instigating other countries to put on pressure on Beijing over the Taiwan issue, as the fierce Ukraine war also poses a dilemma for China. The People's Liberation Army Rocket Force's strategic weapons were supposed to be displayed in National Day military parades, but China organizes such big events only once a decade or once in 5 years, which makes such video footage another option for the PLA to show its muscle to an American counterpart. End quote. The Dongfeng series anti-aircraft carrier DF-21D and DF-26B ballistic missiles, as well as a new generation DF-41 intercontinental ballistic missile, were on display. The DF-41 ICBM is capable of carrying multiple nuclear warheads with a range of over 12,000 kilometers, or over 7,450 miles, meaning it can hit targets on the US mainland. Quote, nearly 24 DF-26B missiles and launchers appear combat-ready. A military source close to the PLA said China had also set up 2 missile brigades based in its eastern and southern theater commands, which focus on the security of the Taiwan Strait and South China Sea. End quote. Meanwhile, this week Washington has sent the director of the Office of Regional Security and Arms Transfers under the State Department's Bureau of Political Military Affairs to the annual U.S.-Taiwan Defense Industry Conference, a 2-day closed conference held in Virginia, which started yesterday. This represents the first time the U.S. State Department has sent an official to attend the event in over a decade, and yet another sign of growing U.S. commitment to Taiwan. Quote, I think it's a demonstration of how important the US feels this issue is that they are here, and not just here in presence to listen, but also to come and talk about what they feel is important and to hear back from us about how we can help support what they want to do. End quote. We should be looking at this action within the context of the Taiwan Policy Act, which would significantly bolster US ties with Taiwan and is expected to be debated by the Senate later this month. It's also no secret what this meeting is about. Quote, in the closed-door meetings, we have had candid exchanges concerning the obstacles and possible risks we are facing in terms of US arms sales, while the US side pledged its best in helping Taiwan solve these problems. How we make the best use of our limited defense budget in a timely fashion to boost Taiwan's capabilities in the coming years will be the most critical task we face. End quote. The sessions discussed 1. The lessons of the Russia-Ukraine war for Beijing, Taipei and Washington, 2. Non-traditional engagement efforts between the US and Taiwan, like training and logistics, 3. Defensive posture, and 4. The, quote, potential deterrence roles of US partners, including Japan and Australia, in the event of a conflict in the Taiwan Strait. End quote. Hey guys, if you're enjoying this episode of China Update, don't forget to hit the like button, and for anyone who wants to go the extra mile and help me keep China Update sustainable, if you like what I'm trying to do here with the channel and you'd like to help support it, Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description below. As always, thank you so much everybody for the ongoing support. Next up, US-China technology competition. This week we learned through multiple reports that Washington is preparing to introduce its most sweeping export controls to date in order to hit Chinese semiconductor efforts. The US Commerce Department is expected to announce measures that would restrict US companies from selling cutting-edge technology to Chinese groups and, quote, severely limit, end quote, the ability of non-US companies to sell products that use US technology to Chinese customers. Quote, the US government wants granular control over any US technology used for semiconductor manufacturing. It wants to be able to veto the use by or exports to specific companies in China across the board. End quote. This is not the first set of measures the US has introduced to slow Chinese high-tech ambitions, and so far US efforts have only seen mixed results. For example, data from China's Ministry of Commerce showed that foreign direct investment in China's high-tech manufacturing and high-tech services sectors grew 43% and 31% in the first 8 months of 2022, compared with the same period in 2021. Though we do remember the important caveats we discussed on Monday when thinking about Chinese FDI. Another aspect to consider too when thinking about China's strategic semiconductor ambitions is that perhaps China's biggest challenge may be more internal than external. This week, Chen Ying, a partner at Huike EdTech, a major domestic education agency, speaking to Hong Kong media, expressed that China's semiconductor sector faces a big skills and knowledge gap, expressing that, quote, there is still a gap in integrated circuits expertise between China and overseas, especially in manufacturing. The gap may be as wide as 1 or 2 generations when it comes to EDA software and production. end quote. Backing up the concerns is a recent report from the China Semiconductor Industry Association, which predicts that China will face a talent gap of 200,000 people in the 2022 to 23 period, a gap which is being exacerbated by the outflow of talent, both foreign as well as Chinese, with overseas passports. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Hopefully, there is an episode tomorrow and there are no issues. If that is the case, I will see you all tomorrow.